And as I'm laying there, I'm crying out to God saying, Father, when is the time of my deliverance coming? I'm in great physical agony. And in that moment, for the first time in this whole experience, I get a word from the Lord. I'm laying there in pain, and these are the words that God said to me in his great love. He said to me, son, this is the story of how I got completely cured of an autoimmune disease called ulcerative colitis. Now, I know what some of you are thinking already. Autoimmune diseases can't get cured. They just go into remission. You have them for the rest of your life. And all I can say to those of you out there who are thinking that right now is this. I have the results of a recent scan that happened exactly 10 days ago from the day that I'm publishing this video. And what those scans show is that there are no signs of my autoimmune disease anywhere in my system. In fact, there's something else. What the scans show is an increase in a certain set of immune system cells that act as the first line of defense against many autoimmune diseases. I'll share more about that coming up in the video. The disease that I had that made my life a living hell for 3 months is completely gone, and there's no trace of it whatsoever. And in this podcast episode, I'm going to tell you exactly what I did to get better. Now, I need to give a little disclaimer to those of you who are watching this channel for the first time. As I share my testimony about how I got delivered from an autoimmune disease, you're going to hear a good amount of talk about God and Jesus. And that's because I am a Christian. This is my testimony. I cannot separate out my faith in the Lord and my walk with him from this story of how I got better. But that being said, I believe that what God led me to do in order to get better from ulcerative colitis, you can do as well. And there are many, many people out there besides me who have done what I did in order to recover from autoimmunity. So I hope that you'll listen to this story all the way through and take from it what you will. Now, one more disclaimer to everybody watching or listening to this. This story does contain graphic descriptions of IBD. So if you're someone who's grossed out by talk of blood or of bowel movements, fair warning, there's going to be some of that in this video. On July 11th, 2024, I am in Florida for a long weekend, visiting my family and my elderly grandfather, just hanging out and helping my uncle do some things around my grandfather's house. And I noticed that evening that I have blood in my stool. And so I didn't really think much of it. I just kind of moved on and went about my weekend. But as a week goes by, I come back home to North Carolina, and then another week goes by. This blood isn't only just not going away, it seems to be getting worse. Every time I go to the bathroom, I'm noticing there's more and more blood in the toilet. Well, after just a couple weeks, I start having to go to the bathroom, not just normally a couple times a day, but 5 to 6 times a day. And then a few days later, maybe 8 to 10 times a day. And I get to the point where I'm not having any normal bowel movements, and I'm having to rush to the bathroom anywhere from 10 to 15 times a day because I've got all this blood and fluid that's just coming out of me nonstop. I also realized that I'm starting to lose weight pretty rapidly. And while at this point there was no pain involved, it's pretty freaky when you start having to let blood out of your system upwards of 10 plus times a day. So I start calling around and trying to get scheduled with a GI doctor somewhere in my area and in my network. But the best I could do was get an appointment for sometime in November. So finally, after about 3 weeks of this, I go to the emergency room at the insistence of my family. And I don't just mean my wife and my immediate family, but my extended family, my parents, my aunt who used to be a GI nurse. And what they tell me at the hospital is that this is serious enough, guy in his mid-30s who's been bleeding nonstop for almost a month, that you need to get a colonoscopy. And they get me scheduled with someone who can get me in within a couple of days. So it's early August and I have a colonoscopy and I get what the doctor refers to as good news back. I wake up and he's like, hey, guess what? You don't have colon cancer. Awesome. And you don't have a hemorrhoid. You have ulcerative colitis. I'm in a daze because I've just been under anesthesia, and I'm like, ulcerative colitis. And he's like, oh, don't worry. It has nothing to do with anything you did. It's something that just happens at random for people. And a GI doctor will see you and give you some medication, and you'll be fine. So at this point, I'm driving home from the colonoscopy, and I'm thinking, well, I've lost 20 pounds in a month, and I've been bleeding nonstop. But hey, the good news is I don't have colon cancer, and it sounds like this is going to be pretty treatable and something that we can do. And at least now, I know what to pray against. I've been given a name. The Bible says that at the name of Jesus, every single knee will one day bow. And I know that sickness did not originate with God, which means I now have something that I can pray against. I have an enemy who I can see. Once you give me a name, I have something in the spiritual realm that I can do battle with for my health and for healing. But when I get home and I talk to my wife and we start researching ulcerative colitis, we realize that most people do not just treat ulcerative colitis effectively and move on with their lives. For many people, finding the right medication can take years. And for most people with this disease, they struggle with it for the rest of their lives. It's something that they constantly have to maintain and wrestle with. Sadly, for many folks, they never have a normal life again. And one of the first things the doctors usually tell you when you get diagnosed with an autoimmune disease is, there is no cure for this. You will have this for the rest of your life, which I have to admit, this wasn't, I don't think, an arrogant thought on my part. I just have faith that God wants to and does heal his people. My first thought was, you say there's no cure? Good. Then I'll get to be the first. So as I'm spending a few days processing this, and my wife and I are researching and trying to come up with a game plan of how to attack it, I now have a referral to go see a GI doctor, but I still don't have an appointment scheduled until November. Things go from bad to worse. I go from having this issue of painless bleeding and weight loss and starting to get anemic to having absolute gut-wrenching pain in my body that is almost constant. It's sort of like this. About every 30 to 45 minutes, I would get this gripping pain in my stomach, and it literally felt like someone was reaching into my guts and clenching them with a pair of vice grips. And the only thing that I could do to get rid of this pain was run to the toilet, sit on it, basically wince in pain until some tiny amount of blood came out, and then the pain would sort of dissipate. But then in 20 or 30 or 40 more minutes, it would come right back again. It was to the point where I couldn't hardly move. I had to walk so gingerly just to not get my stomach to turn in a certain way where I would be seized by this pain. I couldn't even sit in my desk chair or in my reading chair where I meet with God every morning. Laying down in bed at night was challenging. I had to lay back so slowly not to make my stomach just seize up in pain. And getting up usually meant that I had to run to the toilet. So whether it was 4, 5, 6 times a night or in the morning after I had woken up from a night of restless sleep, I would just basically get up out of bed and go straight to the toilet. And again, the pain of this and the weight loss that was happening simultaneously was making me incredibly weak. During these weeks after the first colonoscopy, as things are getting worse, my wife, she told me after the fact, she would look at me and think to herself, my husband is literally withering away before my eyes. That's kind of how bad it got. So August was obviously a really dark time for me because I couldn't function. I couldn't eat. I was getting almost no sleep. Anything I put in my system other than water would basically throw my stomach into a tailspin. And I remember one day trying to actually finish grading papers from the summer semester because the summer semester at the seminary where I teach had just ended and I had to grade final papers. And it took everything in me to read these papers and to give feedback. In fact, there was a couple of days where I would go sit outside in the sun. It would take me some minutes to get from my back door to our back patio table with my laptop. And I would just sit there and my wife would actually read the papers to me and then type the feedback. Because at this point, it wasn't just my stomach pain and the rapid weight loss. I had terrible headaches. I couldn't focus. I couldn't even focus enough to read my Bible, which is something I do every morning. So what I did was I would take a Bible app where it's an audio Bible, It's actually an app called the Word of Promise that I really love that my friend Steve got for me years ago. And I would listen every morning. I would wake up, go to the bathroom, and gingerly walk out to the couch and sit down very, very carefully on the same spot. I couldn't sit in my reading chair, and just listen to the Bible and try to read along as best I could. But one day I'm sitting out back with my wife, and we're trying to get through grading final papers so I can submit student grades. And I've got a deadline. And I remember just breaking down, just totally breaking down, because I like couldn't believe that this was happening to me. I had never been stripped of all of my physical strength before. And honestly, during these weeks, there were days where it was so hard to even imagine getting better. It was hard to even imagine getting back to normal. That's how bad things were. And I remember my wife and I just literally sitting outside in the sun, crying together and just telling each other, we are going to get through this. God is going to heal me. It's going to happen. We just got to stick with it and see it through. And it was during this time that my wife started giving me the best advice she could have given me, which, looking back, I realized as I started getting better, a few months later, I realized that these were words from God. She would tell me during these deep, dark days, I need you to be the stubborn Italian that I knew when I first met you. Back in my younger years, I was a lot more fiery. I mean, I still get fired up now, but in my flesh, I could be a pretty stubborn person. And she would tell me, I need you to be stubborn in the spirit. Do not give an inch to this disease. Don't give an inch. God is going to heal you. He's going to show us the way out of it. Don't give an inch. Refuse to let this thing own you. And she would tell me that all the time. And man, that was so good for me because I needed to hear it like daily. And that's how often she was saying it. So as August is going by and I'm slowly getting worse and worse and worse, it honestly felt like I was slowly dying. I never thought at any point that I was going to die from this, but it was definitely a thought that I was being tempted with. Like, could this be the end for you? And I was pretty sure from my prayer time with God that this was not the end of my life, but there were honestly days where it felt like that's where this was heading. As these weeks are going by in August and I'm still just waiting to try and be seen by a doctor, praying, seeking the Lord, I eventually end up going back to the ER because it's gotten to the point where I'm losing weight so fast and bleeding so much and my stomach is giving me so much pain, I've got nothing left to do. And the doctors at the ER were super compassionate and they were like, man, we can't believe you're not getting seen by a doctor. We could admit you to this hospital, but you're probably going to sit in this ER for at least a day. This is how bad it was. You're going to be in the ER for at least a day before we can actually get you admitted. And then you'll have to wait another day after that before you can see a doctor. So they give me this super high dose of a steroid called prednisone. And they send me home. And I'll be honest, for about 3 days, it gave me a lot of relief. You know, the hardest thing about this was like just daily tasks that I couldn't do. For 2 months, I could not pick up my son. All I could do was sit down and have him sit next to me. That was super hard on me emotionally because I love being with my son and holding him and picking him up. But it was also hard on my wife because she literally had to do everything. Every time he needed to be picked up, put on a changing table, it had to be her. I couldn't do any of it. And just to give some perspective to people who don't know us, my son was under 2 years old at this point. And then after a few days, 3 days actually, of being on the prednisone, all of my symptoms came rushing back and I pretty much reverted to the exact same state that I had been in before for weeks. So there's one guy in particular that I have to shout out in this video, and he's the only doctor that I'm going to mention by name. He's a general practitioner at UNC. He's actually a resident doctor, a young guy. His name is Dr. Alex Repko, and he is a fantastic doctor. And when I started seeing him as a primary care doctor, he was compassionate. He was caring. He actually listened to me and to what I was going through and to some of the things I was researching as potential treatments. And he was the guy that really pushed to get me seen by a GI doctor sooner. And then even after I started getting better, he was the one person that was encouraging me to keep doing the things that I was doing to get well. So I just wanted to mention him because he's someone that I'm really grateful for. And honestly, he's a person that I wish all doctors were like. Didn't just see me as another person shuffling through his office, but actually took the time to really, really be a healing practitioner, and I really appreciate that. So thanks to him, I end up seeing a UNC GI doctor early in September. He kept pushing to get my appointment moved up, and what do you know? It worked. So on September 9th, for the first time, I see a gastroenterology doctor, and he was a great guy. He basically told me, look, you've got what appears to be some, at the time he said mild to moderate ulcerative colitis. I'm thinking mild. If this is mild, I don't want to know what severe looks like. But he basically told me it's got nothing to do with food. It's got nothing to do with anything you did or your diet. It's an autoimmune disease. It's when your immune system attacks itself, and the only thing that we can do is try and treat it with medication. And so he put me on a medication called mesalamine, which is like a pill you take and a suppository. And he's like, let's get you going on this and see what happens, but I'm going to get you in for a colonoscopy as soon as I can because I need to see what's going on in your system myself. So that happened on September 9th. And what do you know? Just a few days after I had heard that I was going to see him on September 9th, I got another call from a private practitioner who was also a GI doctor who said she could see me on September 10th. So the next day, I'm in another office. This is a different situation because it's not in my network. I'm actually paying out of pocket to see this doctor. And she, for the most part, agreed with the doctor I had seen the day before. You need to be on medication to at least try and get this under control. But she was a big believer that food could help me. She said, yes, it's autoimmune. Yes, it's not because of your diet, but I think that we can really help you manage this through you eating a really healthy, mostly plant-based diet. And her advice to me was try and get as many plants into every meal as you can. So she said, have a bowl of oatmeal, put cinnamon on it, put ginger on it, put some, put maple syrup in there. Get as many different plants into every meal as you can. She said it's probably not going to be comfortable because fiber is not good for people that have inflamed bowels. It doesn't feel good when you have irritable bowel and your body is trying to process fibrous food. But she said, give it a shot. So I leave this doctor and I'm excited to start trying new foods. At this point, I've only been eating basically soup for a month and I'm down almost 40 pounds and I'm still bleeding regularly. So I'm excited and I go home and my wife and I make some chicken salad and I eat it, and it's not very great in terms of how I handled it, but it wasn't terrible. I still am living with this terrible stomach pain all the time. I'm still having to run to the bathroom constantly and bleeding. And a few days go by and I'm waiting for my colonoscopy and I start taking this medication that the doctor had put me on, and it's not really doing anything. In fact, it's seeming like it's making things worse, if I'm being honest. And then the day came that I had a breakthrough. It didn't start out as a good day. In fact, it started out as a really, really bad day. We were supposed to try and go to see my son's grandparents and my parents, my dad and stepmom, and all go to a hot air balloon festival about an hour away from where we live. And my wife had said for a while, as this was being talked about, Luca and I will come, but I don't know if Blake's going to be able to make it. And I kept telling her to go and have fun because she hadn't been out of the house much. She had been taking care of me for weeks at this point. In the days leading up, I was thinking maybe I'll try and go. By the way, this day was a Saturday, the 14th of September. By Friday night, she's like, there's no way you're going to be able to go to this. And I'm like, I know. I've been saying I'm going to try to, but there's no way I can because I'm not getting any better. For the few days, been trying to eat some different foods, but things are just not getting any better. And so Saturday rolls around and my friend Hans calls me and says, hey, brother, I want to bring you a journal. My friends, Hans and Lisa, they're two people who are really good friends of mine. Hans is one of my closest friends in life and a mentor to me. And they say, we want to come visit. We haven't seen you in months. And I want to bring you a journal because he's been encouraging me. You need to be writing down what's going on and following what you're doing. So they show up at our house in the late morning with a journal. And it's actually a beautiful journal. It's right here. And I'm very thankful that I got the journal on the day that I did. I'll say more about that in a minute. And we visit with them. They take off, and my wife starts getting ready to go to this hot air balloon festival. And I try to have a bowl of oatmeal. Put some cinnamon on it, put some maple syrup. I put as much as I can in there to try and give my gut different different plant foods to start building back up the microbiome. I eat this oatmeal and I go into one of the worst tailspins I've had since I've been on this. I mean, my guts are on fire. I'm running back and forth to the bathroom. Well, I'm shuffling back and forth to the bathroom, and I'm laying on the couch. I insist to my wife, you got to go. Just go, have fun. She's saying, we're going to stay here. I'm like, no, we've been through this 1,000 times already. I'll be fine. Just go. She leaves, and I'm laying on the couch thinking, I might either have to go back to the ER, or this just might be it. Maybe this is it. I'm sort of speaking sarcastically, but I'm feeling like I'm going to die. I cannot go through another one of these episodes again. And as I'm laying there, I'm crying out to God saying, Father, when is the time of my deliverance coming? I cannot take this. I've been to the bathroom like 5 times in 2 hours at this point. I'm in great physical agony. My head is aching terribly. And in that moment, for the first time in this whole experience, I get a word from the Lord. And it was a crystal clear word. It wasn't an audible voice. There's only once in my life I've heard God speak audibly to me. But this was a word of knowledge that came directly from him. And I know that because it was a thought that came into my mind completely out of nowhere. If you've ever had the Lord give you a word before, you'll know what I'm talking about. And it was something that I understood immediately, and that it was like... the only thing I can say is it's like when a foreign thought comes straight into your mind and you go, where did that come from? But you knew it was God. I'm laying there in pain, and these are the words that God said to me in his great love. He said to me, son, get up and go look. Get up and go look. And while I didn't want to follow that command, I knew exactly what he meant. What he was saying to me was, son, the fact that he called me son in that moment spoke enough to my heart to make me want to obey no matter how hard it was. But I knew that he was telling me to gird up my loins and get up and go keep trying to figure this out. Because my wife and I had been researching and reading and watching videos and communicating with people in ulcerative colitis groups for weeks. We hadn't figured out the solution yet, but we had been trying to. Constantly. And the word of the Lord for me was, get up now and keep fighting. Go look. And so I laid there for another few minutes, not out of disobedience, just out of, okay, I know I need to get up and go try to keep figuring this out. And sort of building up my strength. I got up off the couch. I came into this studio. I raised up the desk and I stood at the computer. And for about an hour, I'm reading through different blogs, different chat groups. I'm even in certain Reddit groups about autoimmune diseases. I'm looking and just searching and searching. I wind up clicking on a video and get taken to YouTube. And then I see on the right side of the screen in the suggested videos, a video from a guy named Dr. Berg. I didn't know at the time that his name was Dr. Berg, but I knew I had seen this guy before. And I see the thumbnail and it says the #1 anti-inflammatory food. And I look at it and I think, I wonder what he's going to say about anti-inflammatory foods. Because this whole time I've been being told to eat white bread, crackers, soup. And then the private practice doctor I saw told me to eat as many different plant foods as I could to help my gut microbiome. But what everybody consistently across the board had told me was, don't eat red meat because it causes inflammation. This is what doctors had told me. I've been a steak guy my whole life, so that was hard enough. But honestly, the thought of eating a steak during the midst of what I was going through didn't sound very appealing anyway. So the Lord tells me to get up and go look, and I'm at the computer for about an hour out of obedience, and I click on this video, and what I hear Dr. Berg say was something like this.
There's one very powerful anti-inflammatory food that is going to surprise you. And I wish I knew about this a long time ago when I had my inflammation. I had a lot of gut inflammation. But you can apply this to any inflammation. This also applies to people with autoimmune diseases and anyone with a condition that is itis, which is inflammation of fill in the blank. Glutamine is the solution for that. But now the question is, what food has the most glutamine? And the answer is meat, specifically beef, the thing that they're trying to get rid of right now. They're trying to get rid of cows because of just some ridiculous reason, but beef gives you a super healing protein, glutamine, that can greatly support your gut and other types of inflammatory conditions, whether you have an autoimmune or some other type of non-autoimmune joint problem.
That's what he says. And I'm stunned at hearing this, but I know that this is a doc. I can tell that this guy knows what he's talking about. The fact that he has 15 million YouTube subscribers isn't like a guarantee for me, but I'm thinking, okay, this guy at least has a serious following, and I know I've seen him before. I hear this, and I'm shocked. And he starts talking about how the thing that's in red meat more than in anything else is an amino acid called glutamine. He says if you have digestive issues or inflammation in your body, which is what ulcerative colitis is, inflammation of the colon and the GI tract, you need to eat red meat every single meal, multiple times a day, because it has glutamine. And if you're a vegetarian, you need to be eating cabbage, because cabbage is the number one source of glutamine in the vegetable world. And if you can eat sauerkraut, even better. I hear this and I start looking back through the notes I took at the last doctor's office, and she had written to try and start taking an L-glutamine supplement. I'm thinking glutamine supplement. Well, glutamine, the number one source of glutamine in the world is cabbage and beef and red meat. This sends me on a complete deep dive. I spend the next 3 to 4 hours at the computer. Now I know what to search for. Carnivore diet, red meat, autoimmune disease, ulcerative colitis. And I start reading testimony after testimony after testimony of people who have healed their autoimmune diseases through the carnivore diet and through eating meat. And I start getting super, super excited. I remember texting my wife. She's at the Hot Air Balloon Festival, and I say to her, honey, we got to talk when you get home. I'm going to stay up. At this time, I would go to bed like at 6 o'clock at night, and I would be in bed till 7, 8, 9 o'clock the next morning because all I wanted to do was sleep. But I wait up, and she gets home. We put our son to bed, and I start showing her all these testimonies and videos. And she's going, wow, this is incredible. There's so many people who have gotten better from this. So we pray. I go to bed. And when I wake up the next morning, I find out that she had been up half the night. She went into her crunchy Christian moms group on one of the social media platforms and did a post. Has anybody ever dealt with ulcerative colitis? And has anybody ever used carnivore diet? And she gets back within less than an hour. This is at like 12:30 at night. A long testimony from a person who shared with us in great detail her story about how she had a severe case of ulcerative colitis and nothing worked until she left the hospital, left the doctors behind, stopped taking the medication that wasn't working, and ate nothing but ribeyes and eggs. And in 2 months, she got completely better and has had nothing since. And it's been 6 years for her at this time. So when I wake up in the morning, my wife has this to show me, and it's just total confirmation. And I told her about how God spoke to me, and I really felt like he was leading me into this because of how I got in front of the computer that day. So we decided to go for it. That day, that night for dinner, I grill a ribeye. For the first time in months, I'm eating steak. And I'm nervous, and she's nervous. And I take a few bites of this thing, and everything's feeling fine. But my stomach, about 5 bites in, lets out the longest, loudest groan you've ever heard in your life. It just sounded like a stomach groan on steroids. Like this is a groan that a Goliath's stomach would let out. And I look at her and she looks at me, and we're like listening to this in slow motion. And I say to her, is that good or bad? And she says, I don't know. But I finish this ribeye and I go to bed. And y'all, that night, for the first time in weeks, in months, I slept for 8 hours and didn't wake up one time. One ribeye. And that's what happened to me. Now, my stomach was probably, my system was probably crying out in Thanksgiving because I finally had food and protein in my gut, but I didn't know if this was going to send me into a tailspin or not. All I know is after the fact, when I woke up the next morning, I felt like my stomach hadn't reacted badly to it, and I had just slept for 8 hours for the first time in months and didn't have to go to the bathroom once. Didn't wake up to have to run to the toilet once. That was the turning point. That was the beginning of my healing journey. I went on carnivore diet pretty strictly for the next couple of months. I ate red meat, butter, and eggs, and then I also ate a lot of sauerkraut, by the way. So I wasn't on straight carnivore. I was on carnivore plus sauerkraut because I wanted as much glutamine as I could get. The carnivore diet was the base for everything. It was an animal-based diet. Now, I need to tell you how the story ends is 10 days after that day where I realized, and 9 days after I had my first steak, I had my second colonoscopy. And what they found was that my condition had gotten a ton worse from my first colonoscopy in early August until the end of September. Now, I already knew this because things had gotten really, really bad for me shortly after my early August colonoscopy. But because of that, when I told the doctor I had been trying carnivore and feeling a lot better, he was like, first of all, carnivore diet, are you crazy? And second of all, it's like, look, you now have moderate to severe ulcerative colitis. You now have ulcerative colitis all through your GI tract, your colon, you have lower proctitis, which was causing the blood, and you have ulcers all over your system. But I knew I was getting better. This doctor had told me, you're probably feeling better because you've lost so much weight and so much blood that the protein's helping. So he wasn't totally anti-eating meat, but he said, like, we need to get you on his conclusion was we need to get you on a heavy biologic medication ASAP so that this doesn't go to a DEFCON 5 point. When I saw the other doctor a few days later after that colonoscopy, and I told her about the carnivore diet, this is the lady who told me to eat plant-based. She was a great doctor, super caring. I still like her and will still see her in the future. But she was not into the idea of me eating carnivore. But she did say, I have to admit, you look a lot better. It seems like you're getting worse. I knew that I had gotten worse. I wasn't still getting worse. But you look a lot better. You sound a lot better. You look like you've put a few pounds back on. And so I asked her, is there anything I can do to prove to you, to show you that even though my colonoscopy results have gotten worse from early August, I'm getting better? She said, yeah, we need to do what's called a fecal cow proteins test, which is basically, sorry, I got to tell you this, it's where they sample your poop to measure where the inflammation is in your body. It's a very general overview sort of test to measure inflammation. So when I had seen her in early September, a few weeks before, my score for that test was what the nurse at the office said was the highest she had ever seen. It was 1370. Normal, I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, is between 1 and 150. Mine was 1370. This was like less than a week before I started carnivore diet. When I got the test results back after being on carnivore diet for almost 2 weeks, it was down to 250 from 1370. Still not normal, but a lot better. So while she did her job and told me, look, you're feeling better and that's great, but I just need to tell you, you could be getting worse, but let's see. I said, and when I saw those scores, I said, okay, this is working. I'm getting better. And what that eventually led me to do was also to incorporate an herb into my health protocol. So I had tried back in August to take a supplement from a company called EviNature, which I really do believe in this company, even though it didn't work for me at the time. This supplement was a mix of curcumin, which is turmeric extract, which is very good for anyone. It's great for your digestive system. It's not a medication. It's just an over-the-counter turmeric extract supplement you can take. It's great for your stomach, great for your gut microbiome. It was that mixed with an herb called Indigo naturalis, which is not used in Western medicine hardly at all, but it is used in Eastern medicine. And in China, they call it qingdai. I had tried taking this mixture back in August, and it did not do well for me. In fact, I don't know if it contributed to me going downhill, but it might have. My stomach was just not in a place to be able to handle it. Indigo naturalis, or 𝗓𝗏 can be a very, very strong medication, but it is the one natural supplement that people have taken and had real serious improvement in ulcerative colitis and Crohn's disease. So as I'm eating red meat and I'm getting better and better and better, I feel like I've gone from 10% to like 65% in a matter of days. And through prayer and through time, my wife and I prayed and discerned, and I talked to Dr. 𝗪𝗶𝘄 and said, I'm thinking about trying the 𝗓𝗏 again. He encouraged me to try it again. I started taking just a very small dose, one 500 milligram pill of 𝗓𝗏. And I actually started just tapering every other day for a week. So I took 4 doses in the first week. And by Friday of that week, by Thursday of that week, after just 2 doses, my bowel movements started getting completely normal again. When I went on carnivore, they went from 25 to 30 a day right down back to like 5 to 8 a day. So they got a lot better. And the bleeding got a lot less. There was still blood and they still weren't normal bowel movements. But they had started getting a lot better very quickly. When I added in the 𝗓𝗏, everything went back to normal, just like that. I ended up taking an 8-week round of 𝗓𝗏 of just 500 milligrams a day. That's all. Very, very low amount when I ordered this 𝗓𝗏 from a company, I think it's called 𝗭𝗪 of the East, and they recommend taking like 3,000 milligrams a day. I wasn't going to do that because that was a lot. 500 milligrams a day and strict carnivore diet. And y'all, by mid-October, I have it all written here in my journal, and I reviewed it all because starting on September 14th, the day that God spoke to me and led me to the carnivore diet, I started writing everything down every day. From mid-October onward, I started getting better and better and better and better. And by like late October, early November, I was normal. I had no more bleeding. The bleeding literally stopped the week I started taking 𝗓𝗏, and I started having normal bowel movements. And after another few weeks, another month of strict red meat carnivore diet and a small amount of this natural herb, it's literally a plant that's crushed up and put into a capsule, I was completely normal. And so I eventually, by the end of November, tapered off 𝗓𝗏. I had quit all the medication after the second colonoscopy. The doctor had told me it wasn't working. I had tapered off the steroid long before this. And then I tapered off 𝗓𝗏, and I started incorporating food, just natural food back into my diet. Fruits, some vegetables. If I eat vegetables, I eat mostly fermented vegetables, but I started having raw dairy, getting raw milk and raw cheese. I had always said throughout this to my wife, by Thanksgiving, I want to be able to have a slice of pie and eat normal. And I had sort of forgotten that, but on Thanksgiving, I had been completely normal for weeks at this point, maybe even over a month. And I ate a normal Thanksgiving dinner, although I didn't really have a desire to eat. I only had like a bite or two of stuffing. I didn't even really want stuffing, but I did have a slice of pie. And y'all, now I can eat anything I want, and I've been normal for months. The best part is that these scans right here from my last colonoscopy, which took place on December 31st, because I asked the doctor when I saw him in December, can you fit me in for a colonoscopy before the end of the year, before my insurance changes? And he said, absolutely. Let's try and get you in. I got the last appointment. I wanted to see if this was true. And he knew I was feeling better, but he wanted to see too, because he was asking me, I know you're feeling better, but if you still have ulcerative colitis, are you open at that point to trying this medication? The medication they wanted to put me on was like $20,000 a month, injectable. And most people don't have success with pharmaceutical drugs for this disease. And if they do, it only lasts for so long. A couple years, they feel relief, and then they have to switch to another medication. I didn't want that. If it was the only option on the table, I would consider it, but I didn't want that. So he was thinking this is a radical turnaround, and he's thinking he might still see ulcerative colitis in my system even though I'm feeling better. On December 31st, 10 days ago from the day I post this testimony, this video, every single part of my entire GI tract, there's nothing. There's no inflammation. There's no ulcers. There's no bleeding. In every single part of this colonoscopy, he writes no sign, nothing, no inflammation. What he did see was an increase in, I've got to look it up because I can't remember the name of it, although I have done a lot of research on this. They are called intraepithelial lymphocytes. These are a group of cells in your immune system that act as the first line of defense in your immune system. And from what I understand, in the actual lining of your gut. And so that's what is listed on my colonoscopy results, that there's an increase of these immune system cells that are there to defend your system from attacks like ulcerative colitis. So there's a couple takeaways about this for me, which are, I always doubted that autoimmune diseases are what they say they are. I'm not a doctor, and I don't think I know better than the doctors, and I don't disparage doctors. I'm thankful for every doctor that's helped me. But when treating a disease is done by suppressing your immune system, which is how they treat autoimmune diseases, I got a real problem with that. It did not work for me at all. Suppressing your immune system might give you temporary relief, but it doesn't do the job. I think it gives you relief by covering up the symptoms. But what fixed my autoimmune disease was an increase in specific autoimmune cells that my body must have gotten from either eating carnivore or using this natural plant herb called indigo naturalis or Qing Dai. The other thing is, look, I'm a huge believer in animal-based diets. The blessing of all this is when I started getting a lot better, my buddies and I, two of my best friends and I had been talking all year before this happened about finally starting to hunt this year. We've been talking about we got a deer hunt this year. And I got hit with this disease and my life was derailed for months. And one day we were joking, talking about it. And I said, yeah, that's not happening. I can't even leave the house, let alone think about going deer hunting. Well, when I started getting better rapidly through carnivore diet, I had a very good friend of mine who told me, hey man, I'll take you hunting. This dude is an avid, awesome hunter. He's like, I'll take you hunting. Come down to my family's place in another state and I'll take you hunting and we'll get you some meat. I'd been eating beef this entire time, but if you're just getting into carnivore, it's expensive. It's hard. But I'd been eating red meat. He said, let's get you some venison. So I go to his family's place out of state for a long weekend. And this is a whole nother story I can't get into, but the Lord ends up in a matter of 10 minutes allowing me to process 2 deer and put almost 100 pounds of meat in my freezer from this trip. And then after that, some dear friends of mine who I have to shout out, one of my very, very closest friends, Ernie Lane, and his daughter, Riley, who now in my book is the best hunter I know. Riley has taken down multiple deer this deer season and has actually given them to me to process the meat. So by the grace of God and through the love of his people and the generosity of his people, I've both processed my own deer in the last 2 months, multiple deer, and been given multiple deer by friends of mine. I have almost 200 pounds. I've put almost 200 pounds of deer meat in my freezer this winter. I've probably eaten already close to 50 pounds of it. That's how much red meat I'm still eating. But I'm a huge believer in the carnivore diet and in an animal-based whole foods diet. My diet now consists of a lot of meat 3 times a day, a lot of eggs, fruit. I eat a lot of fruit. I still eat fermented vegetables every day of my life. I can eat anything I want and not be bothered by it because I'm completely better. I've put 20 pounds of weight back on. I'm exercising, lifting, running 5 and 6 days a week. But I am a huge believer in the carnivore diet. And outside of the Lord and my wife, the person I have to thank the most is Dr. Berg, this guy on YouTube who the Lord led me to show me that red meat is not inflammatory. It's not what they say it is. In fact, if you have an autoimmune disease, if you have ulcerative colitis, I beg you, just try and see if eating carnivore does not help you get better rapidly. Because it's not just me. I've read, no joke, thousands of testimonies of people that this has worked for, and it worked for me. It took God leading me, literally speaking to me and telling me to get up and go look, and leading me to the exact person I needed to find to inform me that I should try this. But when I did, my healing was right around the corner and everything got better. I have no desire, personally, I'm just telling you, no desire to eat like grains or flour. And that's pretty much the only thing I avoid now. Not because I don't like it. It's not like I've had pasta in the last few months. I've had bread. I just don't really want to eat those things because I know how good I feel and how good my body feels when I eat whole foods and unprocessed foods. Meat, eggs, fruit, vegetables. It's a great way to live. And I feel honestly, and I am healthier and better than I've ever been. My blood work that was taken just a couple of weeks ago it was literally straight down the line. Every single thing was in the optimal levels. And I am willing to show that and show these scans to anybody who wants to see them. If you have questions or you want me to prove what I'm saying, go on our ministry website, thatyoumayknowhim.com, send me an email, and I will personally share these with you. I'm not going to share them in this video because it's gross. Nobody wants to look at colon scans, even though my colon's completely healthy. You don't need to see that unless you want to. But y'all, that's my story. That's the story of how I went through an autoimmune disease this year that really, really, really put me through the toughest season I've ever been through for my family and I, and how God faithfully led me out of it. Not through supernaturally healing me, which he can do, and he does do for many people, but through leading me relationally to exactly where I needed to be and to where I needed to go to get well. And it was amazing on December 31st when I woke up from that third colonoscopy to hear the words, "Your system is completely normal. Your colon looks completely healthy. You have no inflammation in your body. You have no sign of ulcerative colitis except these cells that are fighting against diseases and making your immune system stronger," which I can see an increase of. But that's it. You're completely healthy. You're completely normal, which I already knew. But to see the results and hear those words on December 31st, the last day of the year, this started at the beginning of July, was just incredible. And all I can tell you is God is faithful. And if you are watching this and you have an autoimmune disease, but you don't believe in God or don't believe in the power of God, I strongly, strongly want to encourage you to reconsider. God sent his son, Jesus Christ, into this world to save sinners and to bring people from darkness to light. We live in a world that is not as it should be. God did not create the world for there to be sickness and disease and sin and sadness and heartbreak. And one day, this world is going to be free from all of those things. In fact, we're going to live in a new world where we will live forever with no more tears, no more death, and no more pain. But until then, God has put people on this earth like me who are followers of his son, people who have been saved by the cleansing blood of Jesus to testify that he is real, that he loves you, that he paid the highest price possible to prove his love for you, and that he wants you to turn to him and be forgiven of your sins and live life the way it was intended to be lived, which is in fellowship with your Creator. God wants to make you his child, and the only way to become his child is through calling on the name of Jesus. So if you haven't ever done that, I encourage you to do that, and he will be as faithful to you as he has been to me. Regardless of what you go through in this life, you will know peace and joy like you've never known before. So that's my story. That's what happened. If you're listening to this or watching this and you have an autoimmune disease, or you want to know more about the Lord, please feel free to reach out to me. My information, our information, is all in the show notes below. Thanks for taking the time to watch and listen to this. I'm Blake Barbera. This has been my story. Until next time, stay blessed, live loved, and thank you for watching and listening to That You May Know Him.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe. Also, please consider giving us a 5-star review and telling your friends to subscribe as well. We're available on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, iHeartRadio, or wherever you listen to podcasts. Also, don't forget to subscribe on YouTube and check out our website for tons of free, biblically based content like Bible studies, devotionals, articles, and Bible teachings. The That You May Know Him podcast is produced by That You May Know Him Ministries, Durham, North Carolina. You can visit our website at thatyoumayknowhim.com.